We are live. Hello, we have one viewer already. My name is Steve Shiger.
And I'm Mike Foster. Welcome to the crazy show C9K. I got an exciting show for you. Happy Friday and welcome.
Hello, hello. Welcome to C9K, your cloud native video newsletter for your impatient world, covering all things cloud native, Kubernetes, cybersecurity, where the money is going, and often having some kind of technical demo at the end for your entertainment pleasure.
Yes, and Steve's up for the demo today. We're also talking a little bit of Twitter whistleblowing going on. Rookout's raising some money. We have a bunch of malicious crypto miner packages popping up, and we're going to talk how CVEs are reported, which actually is a huge discussion that I want to get into. But first, Steve, what have you been up to?
What have I been doing? So I do my gratuitous shout out now.
Sure. Yeah. You had something planned? Go ahead.
Shout out. Boom. I am speaking alongside of Sonia Moisset at the OWASP London chapter. They almost never do live things because they can't get big enough venues in London. That's the problem. Like, you look at their events and it's like they've done one in April, then they do one in January. Other than pandemic related, the problem is they get so many attendees that they need to book like 200, 250 seater theaters, which is not easy to achieve anywhere in the world, really. And they got one, and I was lucky enough to be invited to be a speaker at that. So if you are at a loose end at 6 p.m. BST, which is actually pretty convenient for anybody else in the world, it will be live streamed. So you can sign up on Eventbrite, or you can just go watch it on the YouTube at OWASP London if you want to see two pretty cool talks. There's also a lightning talk that I don't think has been announced yet. So it'll be a pretty cool meetup, both virtual and live. September 8th, be there, gratuitous promo complete.
Nice. Yeah, I dropped a link in the chat for anybody checking in, and make sure like and subscribe, hit the little bell so that you get notified when we go live. Otherwise, we're here, or we're going to try to be here every Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. GMT, or the UK time, GMT. I don't know, the clocks run through Britain. That's a whole thing, right? Anyways.
They do.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty cool.
Yourself? Anything exciting coming up?
It's been pretty boring. Yeah, going to Raleigh, but I think the big one is KubeCon. I'm hoping to see everybody that I've been missing over the last couple of years. KubeCon Detroit. Not as romantic as Valencia, but
you've got a keynote. You said you've got a keynote though there, right? A keynote.
Yeah, I'll be chatting for 5 minutes about kind of Stack Rock's network security, stuff like that. So, and it's at the co-location day. So
Okay.
Cloud Native Security Con. Hope to see y'all there.
All right. Should we crack onward and upward?
Let's do it. Let's get into the general news.
Alrighty. Are we going to do, I don't know if I'm doing this in the right order, so forgive me if I don't do it in the order you're expecting, Foster, but I have this one up first.
Yep, we put that one up first. And for those watching, all the links are in the show description. But you put this one in by Dan Lawrence. We've seen him throughout the security space for the last couple of years. What'd you think?
I thought it was necessary. Dan's pretty, if you're not connected to him, I'm not. I just follow him because I'm not worthy. Dan Lawrence is a huge in the sort of chain guard salsa sig store community. He's the guy, and it's not all that he writes about. Here's what he's talking about: is when you're trying to analyze or do, whether it's for SCA or container scanning or SBOM generation, which is where he's probably focused on. He was looking at the differences between the outputs of different scanners, and he decided to focus heavily on this CVE 2022 out of bounds memory read in the PCRE2 library, which is written in C, and that can always create, if it's written in C, it probably is going to have a out of bounds memory read bug in it at some point, right? With my my early days being in C, I'm sure I generated thousands of them. But he goes through different ways of reporting, like he's talking about Red Hat. I'm sure you can speak to that and will. And then he goes through Debian and Debian not releasing Debian security. Was it alerts? What's DSA stand for? He mentions not filing a DSA and how different reporting mechanisms, like for example, Sneak, it's critical, right? By default, it's critical. But Sneak downgrades it to a low because there's no DSA. So Sneak is like taking advantage of more information rather than just what NBD might say. And Trivy, again, open source tool, reports it as critical. Let's see if we can find where it mentions that. There we go. Trivy shows this as critical. Sneak showed it as low. And then how different things upgrade themselves. For example, the Alpine just went, we're just going to issue a new Alpine. So I just thought it's a really, really good, like one-off, one CVE example of how confusing CVE reporting can be depending on the tool you're using.
Mm-hmm.
What'd you get at? I know you looked through it.
Yeah, I thought the way that each, let's say, team approached it, some backporting fixes, others just upgrading, right? I think you mentioned Alpine just was like, okay, push the next version.
Well, it's so easy. That's what they do, right?
Yeah. But like you said, there's a difference between finding a vulnerability and then how it's actually implemented in real life. I mean, even Log4Shell, right? Like you technically could turn off the vulnerability if you just change some of the configuration settings. That was always there. It was always something that you could do.
Yeah.
So it still comes up as a 10, but then realistically, if you were to scan and say, hey, well, as long as this is turned off, you guys are okay. Well, the vulnerability is kind of a moot point. So having the context of how to make a change, how to find it, and then where you're making the change to is important.
Right.
From a company standpoint. I mean, this is kind of the bread and butter for certain companies, speaking from Red Hat's experience, keeping things stable, backporting fixes to older versions, because not everybody moves at the speed of Alpine. Right?
That's correct.
So it's both. You need a good process for disclosing vulnerabilities, which didn't actually happen in the Log4Shell case, right?
Right.
So you need a good process. You need a team that actually takes it seriously or can give you the context of what's going on. And then you need to figure out how you're actually going to implement the fix. So there's a lot of moving pieces there, constantly trying to find the balance in security. I like Dan's sort of write up for, he didn't explicitly call it out, but he just says there's trade-offs with each approach, right?
Done to the summary. Yeah.
By not backporting, you do prioritize stability. You don't necessarily want to backport a fix into somebody's image. If they don't know what's going on, they could screw up their application if they have certain features or functions associated with that library. Realistically, if it's a small security fix that is, a small memory, just avoiding that in C, you're not really going to have an issue. I think if anything, you probably have a more stable application on top. But I thought it's a great breakdown. And he is CEO of ChainGuard. I completely forgot about that.
He's the CEO of ChainGuard. Yep, he's the guy.
Yep.
So He obviously is doing a lot of research, I would imagine, about all this stuff. But I think what the other conclusion, maybe he just sort of says this, but not outright, is that I have done talks talking about how, oh, well, you can always start with open source. You know, you can see Trivi is very good. We've demonstrated it on the show for scanning. We've demonstrated Gripe is the other one that is gaining popularity in terms of, I think that's an Anchor open source project.
Mhm.
But this is actually pretty good at highlighting the difference between a commercial solution for scanning and a non-commercial solution for scanning. Like they use Sneak as the obvious example. I can honestly say Aqua does the same thing. They take external context into account. StackRox does the same thing by grabbing like where is it used and why, and same for I would say Palo Alto, Prisma Cloud. Like these commercial solutions have greater advantages because they have more information rather than just a single one-off scan, right?
Yep.
So that I think was a point that wasn't called out exactly, but I think that is definitely a problem with open source solutions. They can be a bit noisy and ring more alarms than you might ever want to deal with.
Yeah. And do you think it's partially for marketing at the beginning because you want to show all of these vulnerabilities to scare the person? Because realistically, you could pull from a couple feeds and quiet the tools if you really wanted to.
Well, I mean, a lot of open source tools are designed for upward momentum towards a paid solution. So how much do you want to give away, right? You want to show that it's possible, but what you're selling is the context. You're selling the value. You're selling the reduction, the decrease in the signal to noise ratio. So.
And also, the security engineers in the back end kind of deciding what policies are default and what aren't, right? I think that's partially it.
Absolutely right. Yep, exactly. So, I think it's fair. It's just sometimes it's worth calling out. All right. Cool. I like that one. Yeah, it's good. I'd never seen anybody write a good article like that quickly about that before.
Yeah, it was very succinct.
Yeah. Nice
CEO knows how to get to the point.
He does. That's why he's the CEO. He's the boss. Yeah. All right. Next one. Two very related ones that we found the 19th. 241 NPM and PyPy packages caught dropping Linux crypto miners. This is fantastic.
Yeah, it's a typo squat, technically. At least I'm not exactly sure what the vernacular is. That a typo squat? Is it like a TypeScript issue?
So typo squat is when the library is IO HTTP and you call yours I0 HTTP.
Yeah, gotcha.
So you're mimicking. So anybody in search might accidentally start downloading the wrong thing because you're flipping a character. Maybe you use like a Latin character instead, or something that's in the alphabet but is not exactly correct. So so that's hilarious, and they're easy to generate because there are tools you can enter the thing and it spits out the typo squat. So, I mean, my theory here is that whoever's doing this is doing that.
Yeah, it's just one person that decided for a week they wanted to take over all these libraries.
Yeah, sure. Was it a researcher? Is this the one where the researcher down at the bottom was like reporting them and then went back and went, there's like 25 more?
Yeah,
like while the research was on.
There's a researcher, Hawk Lubers, software development InfoSec. He's from Copenhagen. And it was kind of one of the talks that I forget who exactly gave it at Open Source Summit. And they had some hacker that they kept catching to the point where the hacker put in all their GitHub repositories like, screw you, because they knew they were following the person. Yeah, I can see it as something like that. It's almost like a back and forth, a boxing fight almost.
Yeah, pretty. It is pretty funny. I know there's a quote here where he's talking about how they just kept coming, which really does make it sound like it's automation that's doing it, right? Because it was such a fast and aggressive application of crypto miners. It's pretty fun. I did like that they were able to get the script, and I always find it funny when they go, "Oh, and we were able to get this. Here it is." Like, okay. If anyone else would like to try, there's enough here that you can reproduce this attack. Fantastic. Yeah, so it's pretty cool, but it's like this happens a lot, and you also just like from a past experience, it happens in Docker Hub all the time. They do the same thing. They type a squat on popular container or image names, and then they just jam they just, because it's so easy. All you do is say from the previous one, add xmrig, put up a hypo squad. It's the easiest thing to automate ever, and it happens all the time.
Yeah. Do you remember the early days of Docker? That was before they had the verified images. This was,
Yeah,
I want to say 2016, 2017, when they first came out with the cloud service almost, and they didn't have verified images. It was kind of just, you had to go to Alpine specific repository, but nobody was doing any checks against it.
right.
Anyways, yeah. And then now I have verified images to kind of basically avoid that whole issue.
Exactly. And you really should when you're downloading. Well, you know what? I didn't even think about this. This is a really good, forward action from Dan's, and I know that probably makes no sense, but Dan works for ChainGuard, and what they're doing is signing.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were using signed packages, this problem wouldn't happen, because you would figure out that this is not the package I thought it was.
Well, so actually, yeah, I was going to say, sorry to interrupt. It leads into the next article, because as I'm reading, I read the title, but I didn't look at who actually wrote it. And then if you look at it, it's the visiting researcher at ChainGuard and a lecturer at FPT
It's
University
John Speed Myers.
Vietnam.
I had a meeting with John Speed Myers 2 weeks ago, talking about salsa verification.
But there's a contributor to the post from ChainGuard.
Well, he's ChainGuard. John is also ChainGuard. I should.
There you go.
But this is the opposite. This is talking about detecting malicious open source software, and how it's not actually that easy to do.
Mm-hmm.
And how I thought it was very funny, because I found these back to back, and I'm like, okay, how much are any of these ones false positives? It doesn't really matter, because they're not all false positives, are they? It's just a case of getting false flags in your detection of open source software is possible. Let me see what he's got. High false positive rates. Let's bring that up a little larger. More than one third of 1,430 popular packages triggered an alert. That's amazing. 60% malicious package triggered alert. True positive rates. It's kind of alarming. It's almost as alarming as the previous one. Like, forget whether they're false positives present or not. Anyway, it's worth checking into these two back to back. The details are below. This is actually a slightly larger article, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Do you go through this? There we go.
Yeah, somewhat. It basically just touches on the fact that they don't have a good benchmark for a lot of what they're looking at, and so they're getting 60% of the malicious packages correct, but then they're alerting on a significant amount more, right?
Yeah.
So you can't even focus on what you need to fix. It's just more of a conversation about how, like you said, it's, if you can sign something and you can verify that that base image is correct too, well, then you can look at all the changes moving forward, so we can kind of eliminate packages from having to get rescanned and filtered through the noise. So I get on calls with people, and sometimes it's, we have 1,000 or 2,000 vulnerabilities, and we need to focus on the top ones, the important, the high, the critical ones, right? Well, if you have a signed image and you know that, like, you've made the change, well, then you can kind of move to the next one. You don't really have to worry about anybody making changes to that. So you can kind of shelve it in the back, especially with open source, versus if you don't have that, well, then how do I verify that the previous version was the right version too, right? Because somebody could backport a fix into all the other versions, and now all of a sudden your image is different, right? So there's a lot of moving pieces there. Image signing obviously is going to play a huge factor, and S-bombs too, sort of the pair. And I remember when I was at Open Source Summit, I think I mentioned this multiple times in previous shows, they had a open source what's the word for it? Verification tool that looked at the actual contributors as well.
Oh yeah,
right.
That's really cool. There's got to be, that's all going to come together under some commercial solution. It's got to
in 2 years. Give it 2 years.
Yeah, for sure. I did like at the very end, just to shout out, right, that they're going to extend this to some open source malware analyzers. So I get asked frequently for open source malware analyzers. Like, there's Clam AV, but everyone kind of makes fun of that because it's a little old. So these is a good little list here. So worth checking out, even if you just want to get some open source malware analyzers for whatever it is, whether container solutions or whatnot. So a little tip at the end.
Cool. We're getting the crazy stuff, right?
Isn't there one more? Hold
Is there?
on. I think there's the
Oh, there
PDF.
is. There's a PDF that we're
It'll be a
not going to
quick.
go through for
No.
brevity of the viewers.
Yes,
Uh,
but I wanted to point it out just for, I don't know what you call it. Not educational, but almost pedantically educational. And the reason I looked at it is because I was internally, we're looking at comparisons between the security of not just GitHub, but everything. Like, how does GitHub
GitLab.
compare with Bitbucket? How does it compare with GitLab? How does it compare with code build, code pipeline? How does it compare with everything, right? And then came upon this paper that came out like this month. Now the downside of this paper, and downside I have with all white papers, is that I read at a 4th grade level. So this is going to take me about a month and a half to get through. I like diagrams. Code bits are good. That's cool, actually. But it's thorough. And I'm going to have to read it, unfortunately, because it goes through lots of different GitHub CI others, features, comparisons, tables. It's pretty good. So if this is something you are out there focusing on, what's my secure CI, what's my secure CI CD, and you're focusing on supply chain like I am, actually, you should go take a read of this. There you go. We're not going to go through it, but it's there, and the link is in the notes.
All right. Now the crazy stuff.
Crazy.
Whistleblower. This is oddly timed with Elon's little spat with Twitter, but ex-Twitter exec blows the whistle alleging reckless and negligent cybersecurity policies. If you read through it, this was the former CISO, basically reported CISO, CTO, reported directly to Elon, or Jack Dorsey from Twitter. And he alleges basically that a lot of the engineers had access to production. There was no limitation on who could go in and access what, and no catching when changes were made. So anybody could kind of go through, pull data from Twitter in production, and you didn't really have any catalog of who did what. So he also alleges that there are a couple of external, let's say, spies or informants that work at Twitter. So, if you have a highly publicized company that can't verify who is in production and doing what, well, then you have, it just takes a couple of leaky people too, right? So I did find the whole bot. He did bring up the bots. Twitter can't verify the amount of bots that are on the site, which is kind of weird that this is linking in line with Elon's little spat.
Yeah.
Might be a very convenient article, but definitely worth checking out. That drama is going to escalate soon.
Well, it's not like it's not involved somehow, but when did we cover the Elon Musk spat on the show? Like, I don't know if we did, but we definitely talked about it. But it was completely justified. So, well,
I think he has a case, right? Because one of the issues with these tech companies is if you don't have a path to actually show how you're making money, well, then how can you justify the stock price or the amount of money I'm paying for it, right?
Unless you're in security.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, a lot of their models that they report to their board have to do with the amount of users that they can monetize, right? So if you have 17 million users and you're monetizing $3 a user, well, then it's X. But then if it turns out it's only 10 million because the rest are bots, well, then you just lied to the board and it's fraudulent, right?
Right. And that's the problem with Twitter. Yeah, completely. Yeah. So that's really fascinating. And it's not at all surprising. I bet you there's a lot of other companies, maybe not as big as Twitter out there, that are the exact same problem, because any startup I've been involved with, it's like go fast. And I don't want to say the Facebook thing, but it is very much about getting product out there and enabling functionality in a race, and lots of corners are cut.
Yep.
Like, everyone has access to prod. Everyone can push. Like, unnamed startup, anyone could push to prod, like to main.
I think
there was no.
Yeah, I understand the issue. The problem is Twitter's been around since what? 2011, 2010, 2008?
I think 8.
And so at what point you have to have security protocols at this point, right?
Yes.
One thing in 2013, like even after 5 years, anyways, that's sort of my big WTF is if he left, and I think he left in 2019. Sorry.
I know, it's funny. I for a moment was trying to be devil's advocate on it, and you're like, nope. Like, yeah, you're right. It's bad. It's terrible.
Yeah. Anyways, speaking of big companies that have been around for a while, the next one's about Google, and it's more of actually kind of a cool thing that we keep seeing pop up.
Yeah. I almost want to search through all of our subjects that we've done since the very beginning and go, how many say largest DDoS attack reported today? Because I'm sure we've done this 2 or 3 times.
Oh, for sure. I think, what was it? How many million requests per second is it?
There it is. 46 million requests per second. I mean, I could try to make this bigger and do that. Record breaking in just 2 minutes from 100 requests per 100,000 to 46 million. Almost 80% more than the previous record of that Cloudflare. We reported that Cloudflare one in June. Yeah, definitely we did that one. The assault lasted 69 minutes. That's a weird number. Why would you stop unless it just got shut down? There it is. That's pretty awesome, though. I mean, if anybody's going to defend that, Google Cloud Armor, well done.
Yeah. Do you think they attack themselves for the press?
Holy moly! It's funny. That's exactly what I was thinking. I was listening to a podcast today that was somebody was talking about self-generated press by doing things like, I think we can handle this. Okay, how many can we handle? Well, we can handle 40. We can't handle 47 million. Okay, let's do 46 million.
Yeah, I think the flaw in this theory is you have to go through a network provider who would see this traffic and be like, WTF, what are you guys doing?
Oh yeah,
right. Because unless you're talking about some sort of data or not database, center that's in a different country, data center that's in a different country attacking your own, it's still going to go through a couple network providers who are going to see and swap notes and be like, what's going on? So it's had to be an external threat, had to be coming from outside the US most likely.
Yeah.
And attacking one of the data centers, probably, I'm guessing, on like the Eastern Seaboard or California or something like that.
There's no further detail about where it came from, is there? I didn't see, but yeah.
That's a lot of servers, because I'm assuming they're going to do some sort of.
Nobody's putting that effort in there.
Yeah.
But anyway, awesome. So where it goes? I mean, it is.
So I was going to say, here's my theory: is
okay, all right.
Typically, you have, let's say, some security teams or hacking teams in other countries, and it's hard to find vulnerabilities and be able to exploit them at scale, right? So the best bang for buck for a lot of these teams is to go and take down a service for X amount of time, and it does some sort of $1 billion in economic damage because websites were wiped out for 2 hours, right? Something crazy like that, and they have to report up the chain. So you're going to these countries, and it's like, hey, we're paying all these hackers in our country X millions of dollars to go and take down infrastructure somewhere else. Like, when's the next project? What are you doing next? And they're like, well, we did this DDoS attack last month. All right, do it again. Did it work? Do it again. Do it somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
And the higher up, because you have to produce something if they're going to fund some of these things, right?
It doesn't say what the customer was though either. It just says it's a Google Cloud Armor customer. So we're not saying, because I would be curious, like, okay, you defended them winning what? If I went to that customer and I had no idea they were under attack, Google Cloud Armor kept it so that they were fully functional for the whole 69 minutes.
I mean,
if that's true,
they just made their money back for whatever they paid for that, right?
Yeah. I mean, the Google Cloud Armor prices just went up a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, all the cloud providers have their denial of service attack feature. And that's you're right. That is pretty good advertising for Google Cloud Armor. Hey, it works. It works. Awesome.
Can't knock it. We're spending money now, right?
Let's do it.
Big time.
Yes. First one.
Rookout. You found this one.
Rookout. Yeah. 16 million in Series B. I thought Rookout was like a more mature company than that. They've been around a while. Their founders here. This is I don't care what the founder is. His name's Loran, but where's the other guy? What are their names? They have their names here. That's weird. They don't have their names.
Yeah, it's not listed underneath.
That's super strange. Oh well. Anyway, I know the guy on the right is Loran. I did a podcast with him.
Shahar Fogel, CEO of Rookout.
That would be on that side.
Gotcha.
Sorry, that's on the left side. So anyway, really well done, because there you go. Founded in 2017. They have been around a long time, but I think they're really benefiting now from the fact that observability is becoming hot,
especially for developers.
And yeah, it's a big deal, and they've been doing it for a long time. So they've got, I guess they went boom, and they've gone a little bit big, which is awesome, because Rookout has already branched off. Like one of the founders, Orvice, has now founded Permit.io. And so they've already expanded a little bit and reinvested. So I'm pretty happy that they're going strong, because they're cool guys and they have a really great product. So not that I'm biased, but I have nothing bad to say.
Yeah, and just for context, they had 8 million in Series A in 2019.
So they bootstrapped for a bit. That's cool.
Yeah. Now, what is also interesting is Series A to expand debugging platform was the Series A marketing, and now it's observability for developers. So it's probably debugging, and they've added some features, and it's gotten to the point where they've made some changes to the story, which I think is pretty cool.
Which is good, because that's where people want. That's what people want to go right now, and it makes sense. And they've got the kind of infrastructure and the product anyway to make it happen. So, got to go for it.
Very neat.
Next one,
ThreatX.
I'm just gonna flip straight over. You added this one.
Yeah, ThreatX got 30 million in Series B, and it's a API attack protection. Discover, visualize API attack surface, detect and block attacks in real time. It's a Salt Security Lite type of.
That's what I was gonna say. Like or no name security, also API.
Targeting their APIs and web applications, which is great too externally, but also as you get more and more microservices, everything's gonna be communicating via API. So internally, and things like Kubernetes, like containers and cloud, it's going to have more and more functionality, let's say, for people who are heavy on containers.
Nice one. I like how all websites say, "Why we lead." Like, really? I only just heard of you. But all right, well done.
One doth protest too much, I think, when somebody says lead. It's like, listen, there are leaders. We just take a different approach.
Yeah. We lead in the way we do it.
Yeah, I always think like our approach is better. Like,
yeah, that's
why
true,
we're like, what's different? Because especially when you do the security landscape for so long.
yeah, I suppose we live in a bubble.
Yeah,
awesome. I think that's the only. Is there another money one, or is that it?
No, that's it. We're into cookie time.
Let's do it.
CVEs.
Now, what starts with the letter C?
Yeah, it's a funny one. I actually, I'm adding it to stream right now. Apple warns of security flaw for iPhones, iPads, and Macs. If anybody got pushed an update last week, that's what this was about. Make sure that you updated. I know that for certain ones, Red Hat is pretty much like right away. I got an update to my Mac, and it's like, you need to update to the newest version, and you have, if it's a non-mandatory one, it'll be like you have 9 days to update, or 10 days, or 7 days, or 5, or 2, or whatever. But then this one was like, no, you need to update this right now. So
yeah, but I'm doing a presentation live on Zoom. Nope. Reboot.
pretty much. No, it gives you some time, but it's a pretty heavy one. So I was following this, and then my dad messaged me like, "Hey, did you see this?" I'm like, "Yeah," but I forgot to bring it up in last week's show.
Oh yeah, that's true. I didn't even really pay attention. I had an update. Everything updated. That's good to know why this was. So all those people who are going postpone, because you don't have a overlord making you controlling your laptop and making you reboot. You should go ahead and do that.
Yeah, you can get full admin access through this one. It's funny. Apple did not say how or report where, by whom the vulnerabilities were disclosed. In all cases, it cited an anonymous researcher. That's how it should be.
Yeah.
I love how these write-ups, it kind of says it like it's an ominous thing. But yeah, I mean, that's how vulnerabilities are supposed to be disclosed. When Log4Shell happened, it was like publicly somebody just dropped it in Minecraft instead of disclosing, hey, there's this hack you guys need to watch out for, right?
Yeah.
And it set the world on fire for a good week.
Only a
Anyways.
week?
Yeah, I mean, we still have what for the next year? It's how many Log4Shell exploits are still in the wild. We're never gonna be fully secure.
Yeah.
The typical stuff.
And then I think we're at tool time now because I added one and we accidentally deleted it.
Yes, I'll bring this up right now. Actually, we'll get to tool time and then we'll explain what's going on. It's time.
Does everybody know what time it is?
All right.
So originally, and if you want to, are you going to bring up your stuff? Okay. So for context, next week, tune in. We're going to look at a couple different RBAC tools. We're going to do a little comparison. We were going to do that, but then Steve had this massive project, this Log4Shell exploit, where he's like, nah, I'll do this one. So this is his practice run. So you can roast them in the comments if you're watching.
Roast me. You got it. Roast me in the comments. Give me suggestions because the there's a whole bunch. So here's the story, right? I had to do you want to call it, they wanted like a capture the flag thing for AWS reInvent. If you're going to AWS reInvent at the end of November, come to the jam area. Come to the jam area and I'll be there and I'll have the finished version of this. And you can play the game and you can try and do like a capture the flag thing. I borrowed lots of this from lots of things, but primarily let's just say, I stole, let's be blunt. There's a lot of Log4j POCs out there. Justin Cormack from Docker did one. But more importantly, there was a dude who did this one here, Cosmer. So I started here and it's not particularly well explained. There's a bunch of videos. It takes a bit of digging to go, what? But it was MIT licensed and I thought, brilliant. That means he doesn't care what I do with it.
Nice.
So I just grabbed it, chopped it up, changed it, made different repos out of it, and tried to make something that would be a demonstration of Log4j. Because as much as I've read about Log4j, I'd not done it. You know what I mean? Like, I think a lot of the major exploits we've done on this show, but we never did a Log4j one. We did like a dirty pipe. We did the ingress. Like, if there's something nuts out there that's reproducible, this is one we had never done. So I feel like this is kind of like out of date, long time coming. The anatomy of this, and it's big enough, I think, right? It looks big enough to me, but I don't know if I can make it bigger. Tell me to make it bigger if I have to.
Maybe a little.
This?
Yeah.
Let's do nothing. Not much happens here. Let's make it so. There we go. Janky bank, and then a little bit bigger there, and a little bit bigger.
There you go.
There.
That's good.
All right. I just clear that off as well, so it's a little less floppy.
You can just write. You can just write C, or Control C for clear.
No, Control C isn't clear. There's a way, but I can't even remember what it is. So the idea is this is a crappy Java app that only has like a backend servlet and a front end JSP. It doesn't do anything. But the idea is that if you try and log in, you go, you throw some junk in there. You go, you throw some junk in there. From an attacker's perspective, if you go to log in and something with dumbass like this comes up, well, not that. That's a good thing. Where it's probably, if you can't read that, it says we have logged your information for security purposes. And in most cases, if you fail to log in on something, it does log who. Like even in like something as stupid as WordPress, if someone's trying to brute force you, you can see who is trying to brute force you by it logs the username. Same thing happens in most apps, and they use Log4j to do it. Now, the problem with Log4j is that whoever worked it out was very smart, I think, whoever was the researcher, because if you look at what's required, and let me see the example that I can do here. Let's see if it's still in my memory. That would be really handy. Okay, great. So if you run this POC that I'm running here, Is this even visible? So let's see that. Can you read that? That's big enough, right?
Yep. Yep.
All right, great. Like the idea there is JNDI is designed for the remote retrieval of Java classes so that they can be externalized and then yet used in your application. That's what it's for. It's not designed to be wrapped around an LDAP server, which then which is used when you're logging some IDs, and then that all gets resolved so that the JNDI LDAP server can return a web server that has a particular Java app class that can be exploitable, which then suddenly becomes a part of your running app and you had no idea that was going to happen. So the idea that someone thought to wrap all this together, I think, is pretty clever in the first place. And then the idea that you would then log in using it as your name, so that when your name gets logged, this unpacks, and then that unpacks, and then suddenly you're reaching out to an LDAP server, which instead of giving you any kind of LDAP related information, is giving you a web server which feeds you a Java class. Right? It's like, I mean, I'd read about it, but I thought this is very cool to see it in action. And then what does the Java class do? Well, am I in the right directory? Yes. So what's cool about the POC thing is that the Java class is built into it. So it's here.
Yep.
So it actually writes this. You can see it. It creates programming. It goes blah, blah, blah. And then within a Python app, it generates a Java class. And this is available everywhere. Like this little bit of kit here.
Yep.
You can get that on any how do I create a reverse shell in Java. It's all over the internet, right? So this is not super intelligent stuff.
Yeah.
But then it saves it out. It actually compiles it on the fly using Java, doing Java-C, finds it, builds it, and then creates, and what it does here, starts up the LDAP, starts up a little simple HTTP on a certain location, and then sits and waits. And what I really like about it is that it then, because it's the Java, because it generates the Java, it doesn't matter what ports I use, because this port that I'm going to wait on up here, let's actually do that then while I'm going to sit up here and I'm going to wait on this matching port. But because my class was built knowing this port, meaning I can put any port I want here, the dynamic nature of the exploit isn't static. I can change the port anytime I run it, which is cool. So now all I really have to do is grab this, which I already did. It doesn't matter what I put it as a password because I want it to be wrong, right? I want it to log the error and then log in. And you see it like now it's stuck. So what happened here is it went to the LDAP, it resolved that. Instead of doing something smart, I passed it this, but /exploit.class. Exploit.class was returned. And because it was a class, it was deserialized. It deserialized, it executed, and here I am now root inside the container that was running the web app.
Very cool.
Yeah, so that's how it starts. And so then I took it to the next level where if you do ls/dev, you can see that then you can start doing the other things. You can go, oh, wait a second.
Now you're in
too
the
much.
Yeah. You're at root, you're root in the container. So
okay, I'm root and I'm privileged. So I'm root and I'm privileged. Can I now get to the host?
Mm-hmm.
And I've got a bunch of stuff in here so far where if I do env, you can actually see that I've got simple credentials. There's a lot of stuff in here. There we go. Postgres password is here. Okay, so if this has access to where's my log or logging? It's logging to a password. I have that. I have the admin. So I can start to, the capture the flag starts here. So now I have database access. Okay, so what if I try and do I know what the Postgres port is? Well, it's always the same. So you can start to try and pick out things out of the Postgres password. Well, what if I want to get to the host? And you can get to the host simply by mounting. It could do mount/dev/sta type1 to /mnt. Oh, you mounted. Oh, Maybe I've already broken into this one earlier because I was playing with it.
Nice.
So right, so I've already got that there. And so I temporarily I've got things like flags where if I do cat/root/ssh/author, I'm gonna spell this wrong, but I'm not actually. I'm guessing at what it is. I've got persistence already established. But let's see. Interesting. Maybe I've already.
SSH and SSH be en root /root.ssh.
I did that.
No SSH.
I've made changes. I've made changes since. I'm working on it. That's the most important thing, is that I'm goofing off with this to a rather large extent.
What just in terms of building something that's a CTF, what is the general workflow you think about? Right, like because there's a lot of different ways to move around inside a container and inside a host and different directories. So I'm kind of just curious, how do you not get lost when you're developing something like this, or do you just go exploit by exploit?
We made a list this time because there's like things I already know how to do. Like one is, well, once I got log4j and I'm in the container, and then I just did a who am I and I was already root. And I'm like, all right, so the container was bad by default, right? I didn't do any protective things. I created a basic Docker file. I didn't do any of I didn't change user. I didn't do any of the stuff that we always preach about. And I thought, all right, well, what's the basics I could do with that? I could, as is in previous CTFs I've done, just make the YAML deployment privilege and just show that's just the keys to the kingdom right there, right? So the easiest thing is to mount and then do a chroot, and then suddenly you are completely root on the host. Well, what can you do with the host to gain persistence? A few ways. Like one, you can start your own containers or do anything like that. You could drop your SSH key into the .ssh, and then away you go doing that. Oh, I know why it didn't work. Because all right, never mind. I just realized why that failed, because the container's running on the worker node and I didn't put the right things on the worker node yet.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Depends where the container node comes up, right? So I've got to put things in there.
Oh, yeah. So you got to lock it to a specific node that you set up properly.
So I have the same repeat pattern. I haven't done that yet. But so that's the next thing. And then after that, like what we're working on is, well, what would I want to do next? If I have access to the node, what good is that, right? Well, depending on what
service
cloud
accounts.
Well, that's a start, right? So we're starting to work on metadata server access. So depending on whether I'm in Google, which I am, there's a metadata server for Google that I can access via curl, and I can pull out certainly public SSH keys, and I can get service account names. There's a lot I can get from that one. But within AWS, which is what we're doing this for, there's a whole lot, depending on how you provision the object that I have access to. So if the cluster is over provisioned, or the EC2 is over provisioned because it has associations with service accounts or IAM roles, that because now it's the lesson in the soft inner versus the hard outer, or the egg, right?
Yep.
You've assumed no one will ever be in there unless they are an admin. So for ease of use, I want to have access to certain elements like storage, for example. Once from in there, if I have access to storage because that needs access to storage because it's a logger, do I have access? How do I have access? And how much more is in that storage than should be in that storage? So then that's where the CTF is now progressing. The basics is log4j, but then it's all the different steps we can have, because like we do more cloud security than we do container security at PushGroup. So I started with container, and then I started with actually
host, and
then vulnerability, then to misconfiguration of Kubernetes, then to misconfiguration of cloud.
Then
so that's
probably
the order.
Maybe like networking tools to see what the reach is of the cluster.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
It's kind of your typical checklist when you get in and you have access to something, right? It's what can I access? What credentials do I have? Is there any storage hooked up? Right.
And we're going from there. Yeah. And now, so now I started it off, and then my colleague Matt is now building it. Well, he loves automation, so he's creating all the CloudFormation that just makes this all pop up.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then Barak, who's our founder, is the cloud security guy. So I showed him this and he got really excited. And so now he's building poorly provisioned infrastructure into the cloud formation so that we can bounce from parts of the cloud infrastructure to others. So that'll be the final thing at reInvent is that, but then I'm not telling you where any of the flags are. There's a flag in every piece of it, and you've got to figure out where's the flag. So that's the start. The early, yeah. What I also haven't told you is that there's a gigantic Rickroll in the middle of it all.
I love that. All right. So reInvent November 28th to December 2nd in Vegas this year, correct?
Yeah.
Right. That's a big one. That's pretty cool. And you'll be at, where is it exactly?
It's called the AWS Jam. So you'll see it. I mean, at the previous Reinforce, it was almost near the entrance. You'd go in and there'd be the village where there'd be like weird experiments, but then the jam would be there too. And you just walk in and you look at a menu of cool activities you can do and learn from, and you pick the one you want. So we're kind of hoping that this will be an attractive event for people who are security curious, to get them keen on here's how a hack works, but here's then how a defense works, because we're going to build the defenses afterwards. Yeah.
I love that. I sometimes don't like how CTFs are so linear. I've seen. There's been a couple where you get in and it's like, well, there's one way to get out of this container, and you have to kind of narrow down the 3 things to find the one way to get out. Whereas sometimes it's like, well, if somebody's privileged and you give them privilege, there's multiple different ways and multiple things they could do with it, right? So it's just sometimes it seems very controlled versus, hey, these are the things that you should highlight that give you so much. Because maybe like how often do you get into a container and then there's just one way to get out? Typically it's something that somebody's completely forgot, and there's a larger say surface area, right?
Oh yeah. So, and privilege is the one. I mean, and what's the I sometimes when people say, oh, I've left it as privilege, I'm thinking nobody does that anymore. And then of course I go to wherever it was last week, my hat, my brag hat, DEF CON. And there's a guy talking about how Longhorn deploys as privilege.
Yeah.
And I'm like, really? All right, this still happens. Fine, great. Let's just do that then. And I do think that Java is kind of a language where when people, I mean, not to pick on Java people, but Java generally is a very old school monolith to microservice. So I can completely see people moving Java apps into microservice and not getting things wrong. So
yeah, and I mean something as simple as Linux capabilities, not dropping them, right? You can get a lot of privilege access that way. There's just there's tons of different ways to exploit containers and all the misconfigurations. Sometimes you get in there and it's just we have these 9 flags and there's this very specific route, but they don't actually showcase what would typically happen. It's more about just navigating the map that they've laid out instead of being like, here are 3 applications you can break into. You can go 9 different ways with these 3 applications, right?
Oh yeah.
It kind of gives you more of a, this would be the workflow that you would typically go through as a hacker, instead of just, oh, I need to know these 9 things in order to move through this path or this puzzle. Yeah. Right. Does it make sense?
I totally know what you mean. Yeah. And one more thing, maybe just to mention, like, what's the inspiration of the workflow for a CTF? I did a CTF like a long time ago. It's probably one of like the first ones I did at an OWASP conference. And the end, you knew the goal in the beginning, and that was to get access to Git or to get access to the code repo, but you start in production. And so that is now the goal here.
That's cool. I like that.
So eventually, because it's AWS, we're looking to get access to code commit.
Gotcha.
And once we're there, well, that's it, right? It's already kind of game over that we have access to production, but the fact that we can get access, then it becomes more like a SolarWinds scenario. We found a way in, not through social engineering, but through a very popular mistake.
Yeah. It's not like you're just randomly jumping into a honeypot and going like netcat, right? It's very targeted, which I think is cool, especially just in terms of the story. It'll be a lot easier. You can almost craft a narrative around an end goal.
Yeah, so that's the idea. We don't know how we're getting access to code commit yet. That bit's to be written, but we think we can do it.
All right, you got 3 months.
That's it. Easy. Except I have to have it done by next week. That's why I was freaking out.
That's why you want to do this demo this week. That makes sense.
Yes.
Very cool. Yeah, if, looking forward to seeing that. And after reInvent, you'll have to come on and give it a try, or I'll
That's
give it
true.
a whirl, maybe.
After reInvent, I can do the reveal show here and show,
Mhm.
okay, here's where all the flags were. Because if
Yeah, I mean,
there
we're
will be
definitely just going to do
hints.
a reInvent show. You got to give us the breakdown, what's going on, take all your photos of all the funny marketing
Oh, yeah.
language.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Yeah, we'll do that for KubeCon, definitely.
Amazing. I think that's it, right? We did
That's
it in an
it.
hour again.
Yeah, very nice. Any final thoughts before we head out?
No final thoughts. My brain
All
is
right.
melted down. So
Nice. Next Friday, be here. I'll be here and then heading to Montreal for a long weekend. So we're talking RBAC policies for tool time. Steve and I are going to compare some open source tools. Other than that, happy Friday, Steve.
happy Friday. See you next week.
Take care.